Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
The 1956 monograph Syntactic Structures by Noam Chomsky represents a singular moment of intellectual crystallization in the study of language, appearing as a slim volume derived from his lecture notes for an undergraduate class at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Its unassuming presentation belied the profound reorientation of linguistic science contained within its pages. The work functions as a prolegomena, a tightly reasoned argument for a new way of conceiving both the object of linguistic inquiry and the formal apparatus required for its description. This essay will undertake a direct and rigorous evaluation of the book's internal claims, proceeding chapter by chapter through its logical architecture. The analysis will focus on specific mechanisms proposed, the evidence marshalled for their necessity, and the coherence of the overall theoretical edifice that Chomsky begins to construct. We will examine how the monograph systematically dismantles prior frameworks through formal proofs and argues for the adoption of a generative, transformational model of grammar, all while maintaining a deliberate and strategic focus on the autonomy of syntax. Section 1. The axiomatic goal of a generative grammar. The initial chapters of Syntactic Structures establish the foundational axioms of Chomsky's research program. The primary intellectual move is to redefine the purpose of a linguistic theory. The goal becomes the formulation of a grammar for a language, where a grammar is understood as a device that generates all of the grammatical sentences of that language and none of the ungrammatical ones. This definition immediately elevates linguistics into the domain of the formal sciences, seeking an explicit, predictive, and finite mechanism capable of characterizing an infinite set of objects. A central claim within this section is the posited independence of grammaticality from semantic sense. Chomsky presents the no-from a sentence, colourless green ideas sleep furiously, as a demonstration piece. He asserts its grammatical well-formedness stands in stark contrast to its semantic incoherence. Conversely, the string furiously sleep ideas green colourless is presented as both ungrammatical and nonsensical. The crucial piece of evidence is the paired sentence, friendly young dogs sleep quietly, which exhibits an identical syntactic structure while being perfectly intelligible. The evaluation of this claim reveals its strategic power. By decoupling syntax from meaning, Chomsky carves out a domain of inquiry that is amenable to the formal tools of logic and mathematics he wishes to apply. He effectively tables the notoriously complex and ill-defined problem of meaning to focus on structural properties alone. The argument's force comes from its appeal to native speaker intuition. We recognize the structural parallelism and the difference in grammatical status, lending credence to the idea that our linguistic competence includes a purely formal component. The work thus sets its own criteria for success. A successful grammar is one that achieves observational adequacy by correctly sorting grammatical from ungrammatical strings, a goal that is precise, testable, and free from semantic ambiguity. Section 2. The formal inadequacy of finite state models. Having established the goals of a grammar, Chomsky proceeds to evaluate the simplest class of device that could possibly achieve them. Chapter 3 presents a formal critique of finite state grammars, which are equivalent in power to Markov process models prevalent in information theory and some psychological theories of the period. He explains this model as a machine that moves through a finite number of internal states, producing a word upon each transition from one state to another. A sentence is thereby generated as a left-to-right sequence of choices, with each choice conditioned only by the current state of the device. The evaluation of this model is decisive and elegant. Chomsky argues that English contains syntactic processes that a finite state device is formally capable of generating. His key evidence involves the phenomenon of center embedding, where a constituent of type A is embedded within another constituent of the same type A. He provides examples such as the set of sentences beginning with if S1, then S2, or structures like the man who said that S is arriving today. The logic of the argument is that a language with such structures requires a mechanism with some form of memory to ensure that the dependencies are correctly paired. For example, in a sentence with multiple message relative clauses, the number of verbs must match the number of subjects, and they must be correctly associated. A finite state grammar, possessing only a memory of its current state, lacks the capacity to track these long-distance, nested dependencies. The argument is presented as a mathematical proof since English permits, in principle, an unbounded level of such embedding. It cannot be a finite state language. This section of the book is a masterclass in argumentation. It takes a model seriously, formalizes it, and demonstrates its inadequacy with respect to the empirical data of language, thereby clearing the way for a more powerful alternate. Section 3. The descriptive limitations of immediate constituent analysis. The next logical step in the argument addresses the prevailing model of syntactic analysis within American structuralism, immediate constituent analysis. Chomsky formalizes this approach as phrase structure grammar. This type of grammar consists of vocabulary and a set of right rules, such as the rule that a sentence rewrites as a noun phrase followed by a verb phrase, and that a verb phrase rewrites as a verb followed by a noun phrase. He acknowledges that this model is formally more powerful than a finite state grammar and is capable of handling the center embedding phenomena that ruled out the simpler model. The strength of phrase structure grammar, as he presents it, lies in its ability to assign a hierarchical structure to sentences, capturing the constituent relationships that speakers intuitively recognize. However, the core of this section is a critique of the descriptive adequacy of this stronger model. Chomsky presents a series of linguistic puzzles that phrase structure grammar handles with great difficulty or inelegance. A primary example is the relationship between an active sentence like "the man hit the ball" and its passive counterpart, "the ball was hit by the man." A phrase structure grammar must generate these two sentences with two entirely separate sets of rules and derivations, thereby failing to formally capture the systematic relationship between them that any speaker understands. Another critical piece of evidence is the existence of discontinuous constituents, as seen in the formation of questions like "what did the man see?" The verb see and its object what form a conceptual unit, yet they are separated in the surface string. A phrase structure grammar, which builds continuous constituents, struggles to represent this relationship in a natural way. Furthermore, he points to cases of constructional homonymity, where a single string like the shooting of the hunters can be understood in two different ways, a structural ambiguity that is difficult for a simple phrase structure grammar to explain. The evaluation of these claims is that they successfully shift the criteria for a good grammar from mere generative capacity to a higher standard of explanatory power and parsimony. The argument is that while a phrase structure grammar can generate these sentences, it does so in a way that is cumbersome, redundant, and counterintuitive, treating related structures as wholly distinct. Section 4. The transformational component as a solution. Having demonstrated the formal inadequacy of finite state models and the descriptive inadequacy of phrase structure models, Chomsky introduces his central proposal, a transformational grammar. This model represents a significant increase in complexity and power. He proposes a linguistic theory with two primary syntactic levels. The first level is a base component consisting of a simple phrase structure grammar that generates a limited set of basic, active, declarative sentences, which he terms kernel sentences. These kernel sentences are represented by their underlying phrase structure trees, or phrase markers. The second level is the transformational component, which consists of a set of rules that operate on these basic phrase markers to produce the more complex and varied sentences of the language. A transformational rule is a statement that maps a structure with a given analysis onto a new structure by performing operations such as adding, deleting, or reordering elements. The classic example provided is the passive transformation. The rule can be stated in a general form if a string has the structural analysis noun phrase 1, followed by an auxiliary, followed by a verb, followed by noun phrase 2, Then it can be transformed into a new string with the structure noun phrase to, followed by the same auxiliary plus the morphemes be and n, followed by the verb, followed by the preposition by, followed by the original noun phrase 1. An evaluation of this proposal reveals its ingenuity. This two-level architecture directly addresses the problems raised in the previous section. The active-adversive relationship is now captured by a single, explicit rule, deriving the passive from the structure underlying the active. Discontinuous constituents in questions are handled by postulating a simpler underlying order in a kernel sentence, with a transformation moving an element like what to the front of the sentence. Constructional homonymity can be explained by showing that a single surface string is the result of applying different transformational rules or applying them to two different underlying kernel sentences. The central claim is that this model achieves a new level of elegance and explanatory adequacy. It simplifies the base phrase structure components significantly, lodging the complexity of the language in a well-defined set of transformational rules. This move provides a formal means of relating disparate sentence types, thereby capturing a deeper level of linguistic reality. The inherent power of this new device is palpable, and Chomsky presents it as a necessary tool to solve the empirical puzzles of linguistic structure. Section 5. The confluence of syntax, semantics, and phonology in the final chapters. Chomsky sketches a vision for how this syntactic engine fits into a complete model of language. He proposes a tripartite architecture in which the generative syntax is the central, driving component. The output of the syntactic component, which includes the final derived phrase markers produced by the transformations, serves as the input to two other interpretive components, the phonological component and the semantic component. The phonological component contains rules that convert the abstract syntactic and morphological representation into an actual phonetic representation, or sound. The semantic component operates on the phrase markers, particularly drawing information from both the deep kernel structure and the transformational history to determine the meaning of the sentence. The evaluation of this architectural claim reveals its radical nature. It posits the absolute primacy of syntax. The system generates structures, and only then are sound and meaning assigned to them. This stands in stark contrast to any approach that would derive structure from meaning or communicative intent. Chomsky's justification for this syntax-centric model is implicit in the entire book's argument. Syntax, as he has defined it, is the only component of language that appears amenable to the kind of rigorous, formal analysis he champions. Phonology is linked to the physical world of sound waves, and semantics to the murky world of concepts and beliefs. Syntax, in his formulation, is an autonomous combinatorial system. The book offers less detail on the workings of these interpretive components, a fact that would become a source of immense future research and debate. However, within the confines of syntactic structures, the proposal serves to complete the logical picture. It presents a comprehensive, albeit programmatic, vision of language as a formal object, with a generative syntactic core whose properties can be studied with the precision of a natural science. The model's appeal lies in its clean separation of concerns, providing a clear research path for linguists. Conclusion. In conclusion, a direct evaluation of the claims within syntactic structures reveals a work of extraordinary logical force and strategic brilliance. The monograph's enduring impact stems directly from the rigor and coherence of its internal arguments. Chomsky begins by establishing a new, formal criterion for success in linguistics, generative grammar, and strategically sets aside the complexities of meaning to achieve this clarity. He then proceeds with a systematic, step-by-step demolition of alternative models. The argument against finite state grammars is presented as a formal proof of their inadequacy, a definitive statement on their limits. The critique of phrase structure grammars is more nuanced, shifting the grounds of evaluation from what a system can generate to how elegantly and insightfully it does so. The introduction of transformational rules is then presented as the necessary solution to the empirical puzzles that simpler models fail to resolve. The final vision of a syntax-driven linguistic architecture provides a complete, if skeletal, research program, the book's power lies less in providing a finished and comprehensive grammar of English and more in its compelling argument for what a theory of language ought to look like. It is a formal, explicit, predictive system designed to account for the structural properties of language and the knowledge of the native speaker. The claims made in 1956, fully autonomy of syntax to the necessity of transformations, set the agenda for linguistic inquiry for decades, precisely because they were articulated with such precision, intellectual audacity, and persuasive analytical depth.
We really appreciate you tuning in to this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.